Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining me for my speculation hits and misses presentation. This is a little bit different from my normal Zooms. I'm going to run you through a bit of history, some of my greatest hits and some misses, some things totally out of my control, and also what we're looking at now in relation to some of our junior stocks. I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown on a few quality stocks that we're heavily invested in and a little bit of an outlook. There's the all-important disclaimer. This information is true as I talk through this presentation. I want you to take this as general advice only. I'm not taking into consideration your risk tolerance, your financial position, or any other factors. All I can do, I'll tell the truth. I'm not going to bullshit anyone. I'm happy to disclose all my positions, where we've bought. There's no ulterior motive about this. Some of you decide to look into working with me, you're most welcome. At the moment, I'm pretty quiet, so I might have a few weeks before things get a little bit crazy, but certainly I have plenty of clients, but always room for some more, of course, with the right attitude. So when I left school, I did quite well. Managed to top my school in English, of all things. I joined the New South Wales Police Force, did 8 years in the job. And one of the advantages of being in the police was 12-hour shifts. So I tended to work on the weekends, obviously better for noise complaints, parties, a lot more action. And then I'd take most of the weekdays off, and I started to fall in love with the stock market. And from my memory, it was around the time of Kurt Cobain's death, and many would remember that in the early 90s. The first signs of becoming really keen was when I bought a Panasonic TV. And you can see there that the pages of stocks, the Commonwealth Bank to your right was $9.11. Oh, it's a bit of a shitty omen. Now last I looked, they're about $125. So that shows you how many years ago. I also used to go to the stock exchange in full uniform. And in those days in Bond Street, every share price would flash up. And if I missed the share price of the stock I was in, sometimes I'd have to wait half an hour to see it. So I would hang around the stock exchange with a group of speculators, and I'd pick up some tips, some of them great, some of them not so great. But in full police uniform, they'd often talk to me, and still it was a great place to learn about the stock market. The Queensland Police then did a bit of a recruiting drive. They offered us a short academy training stint, more money. They promised me Maroochydore. I ended up in the letter, it said, you're going to Maryborough. And I drove up to Maryborough. I thought, no friggin' way. So I ended up at Gympie, and Gympie was pretty quiet, even though there was a lot of firearms and crazy farmers in that area. And again, I continued to teach myself the stock market. And one of the most handy things I did was pull out the share price pages, like from the AFR, and have other police test me on about 20 stocks. And then I started to pick up the change in behavior. In the early 90s, I was living a few hundred meters from Bondi Beach. I was working at Bondi Police Station, so I could walk down the beach for a surf, walk to work. And one of the crazy things about 1993 was that I could buy a one-bedroom unit close to where I worked, near the beach. I paid $115,000 for it, and that was 2.4 times my shitty police wage. These days, that unit would probably go for 1.3 million, or about 13 times. So you can see how that's expanded, and it's irrational. So that's a little bit about my early history in the stock market. I did do a bit of time with blue chips. Then I have a bit of a contrarian mind. So I always look for patterns that will change. Hence why normally I don't do well in footy tipping, but this year my wife and I are leading a couple of competitions. So my contrarian brain has been working. So in 1998, I left the New South Wales Police. I got to acting sergeant. I was working at Canterbury in the transit, so I pretty much covered the whole of Sydney. And I became a stockbroker. I put all my possessions in my VP Commodore and flew over to Perth. And in late 1998, early 1999, the tech sector started to fire up. And in the broking office, at times, we were that bored, and we were actually trading Optus warrants, of all things. I was getting set in a junior resource stock called BMAX, and looking at some others. One of the earlier ones was Herald Resources. So BMAX, I bought a shitload, around 11 cents. Then Aluka bid 24 cents for them. And one day I came into the office, turned on my seat screen, and there was hundreds of bids on the screen. And what had happened is the late Rene Rivkin, bless him, had recommended his subscribers buy BMAX. And even though the Aluka bid was 24 cents, it ended up peaking at 42. So that was the power of the newsletter back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So as you can see, the dot-com bubble as a broker for me was absolute it just went nuts. I couldn't describe how crazy the trading was. During a 3-month stint, I was writing $120,000 in brokerage a month off $60 buy and sell notes. I was at, often I got my seats license, which meant I could enter orders, and I'd be at work 2 to 3 hours after the market closed, matching buy and sell orders with other seats operators. And one of the best things the ASX did was bring in the single price closing auction, which we call the snap. So the market shuts at 4 o'clock Eastern time, and you get a 10-minute period where normally computers will dick around with the shares, and the market will snap shut between 4:10 and 4:11. But that saved me a lot of grief. So during the tech bubble, you could buy a mining stock, and then suddenly they'd put out an announcement that they're looking at .com. They're putting in a tech investment. We had quality junior mining companies turn into online wine sales. Mogul Mining became Wine Planet. Golden Hills Mining was 2 cents. That became DavNet, peaked at $6. We had Western Minerals, was a penny. That became adultshop.com, selling sex toys. I think that went to about $3. And the whole sector just went berserk. And most of the junior resource companies felt left behind. So they said, we've got the intention to go .com. We've got the desire to add shareholder value. And most of that was a complete crock. But people were going nuts. And this was the time when hot copper really started to fire up. And we had live Merc chat. And you'd often get up to 200 people on that chat. So in the US, The NASDAQ at that time got over 5,000 points. Stocks, pets.com, anything.com was going ballistic. Some stocks were listing at 600-700% premiums. And then it all turned to complete shit. And the NASDAQ pretty much lost about 80% in value. And to me, that was the craziest time as a broker. With lots of parties, lots of drugs and other things. I never touched drugs. I didn't trust it. I tried to keep myself relatively sober, but during my early times as a broker, I was earning $60,000-$70,000 a month, coming in from an annual police salary of 50 grand if I was lucky. So this was probably the best learning curve, better than any university course I could have, because I got to deal with fear, greed, and stupidity. And what I'm going to suggest on this Zoom is that the dot-com bubble is not dissimilar to every other speculative bubble we've seen since. So in 2001, I had a bit of time. So I sat down and wrote a book pretty much in a week. I self-published it. What I wanted to create was a textbook on speculation. And I think I did a pretty good job. So I went through all the sectors. I went through the psychology. I put in a lot of my articles. And there was one day I was walking towards a bus stop and the hairs stood up on my arm. And I just got this nasty feeling that was all about to go pear-shaped. And a couple of weeks later, when the NASDAQ crashed, you couldn't catch a bid. And there were some stocks, such as Solution 6, I think it was trading at about $16. And they were, I think the MD started to say, well, we're going to get to 100. So that was the purpose of the book. I printed a couple of thousand. I've only got one left here. So yeah, it did pretty well for me. And then in between .com and the uranium bubble, with sticky tape, paper, and we were playing cricket in the aisles of the broking firm. My pay collapsed shortly thereafter. I think 2001, 2002, my pay dropped to about 32 grand after I was pulling 60 grand a month. Obviously, when you're earning big dollars, you start to get delusions of grandeur. And I went out and bought Perth property, which at the time was extremely cheap. But when your income then turns to dust, it's a struggle to hang on. But fortunately, the uranium price went vertical. And what I noticed in this bubble, many of you would know a stock called Paladin, which the rumors were going around that they were going to go under. They had some less than desirable crap going on. And the share price got down to 0.8 cents. Then one of my Hawaiian-based fund managers saved the company from going under. We did a heap of options at 1.1 cent. Rick Rule, who many of you would know, came in and saved Paladin. And on that burst where the uranium price touched, I think it was about $149, Paladin's share price peaked at, from memory, $10.52. And from under a cent and going broke, you could have bought as much as you wanted. And then suddenly, there was only a handful of uranium companies before it went nuts. And then there were hundreds. And the tech stocks, bombed out tech stocks, then said, well, we need to recreate shareholder value, and we're backdooring in a uranium project. A lot of them had massive runs. And when you saw an announcement with the word uranium, you certainly got a dose of dopamine. But once the action subsided, there'd be companies backdooring in uranium projects. And that was like showing up at a piss up at 3 a.m. holding a vegan pizza. No one wanted it. And that's the same with every bubble. So if you don't take away anything, the key point is all these speculative bubbles are the same. They will be based on something real, but there'll be hundreds of Me Too's, and most of the projects are absolute shit, as I noticed during the uranium bubble. Now, in 2001, Minotaur Gold discovered Prominent Hill. And the photo on the left, the photographer was where Burmine drilled, and that drill rig in the distance, I think it's a decent golf shot, was where Minotaur Gold stuck a drill hole into a project called Uranus. Obviously, they had to rename it, and they discovered Prominent Hill. They came up with 107 meters at about 2% copper and 0.65 grams of gold. And I remember that day, I was on the seats machine, and you could have bought Minotaur Gold all day at 28 cents. I rang David Harley from Gunson Resources and said, well, how close are you from this discovery? He said a few hundred Ks, and Gunson, from memory, went from about 5 cents to 40, and there was a bit of a regional bubble. But that was way back in 2001. And as you can see, you can miss these things by hundreds of meters. So anyway, that was really the first major discovery that I was involved in. At the time, Minotaur Gold were raising money at 10 cents, and obviously there was a rush for the free money. But post that, I had a very long and prosperous relationship with Minotaur, which ended pretty much in the takeover of Dermatalica not that long ago. So again, exploration is incredibly risky. You're essentially risking 50 to 60% downside for 500 to 1,000% upside. So we're certainly due for a big discovery. And I'm looking at gold or base metals. Obviously, WA1 found a monster, niobium, and that went from 20 cents to about $20, and has inspired a niobium bubble where companies are backdooring in any project, and that's now spread to South America. So good luck with that. But anyway, yeah, that's the discovery of Prominent Hill. My two most successful stocks over my career are Ramilius. I sat there and bought about a quarter of the company for clients. Joe Holdsworth, who ran the company at the time, was one of the most down-to-earth managing directors I've ever met. He'd show up at the office. I'd normally be the only one in the presentation. So we bought a shitload of shares down to 6 cents. We bought as many options as we could get. And what gave me really the inspiration to buy this stock for pretty much every client was the soil samples and shallow drilling. And I just got back from Europe on that day, and they came out with 48 meters at 154 grams per ton gold. Like, this is one of the best intersections I've ever seen. And I didn't know where to start. My hands were certainly shaking. And I think when it peaked, towards that peak, I ended up writing $140,000 commission, mainly in sell orders. Some clients, I remember buying the stock for 6 cents. I was hitting bids at $1.95, $2, and they were big bloody bids. And I remember hitting that sell button quite hard. The other thing, many clients, they actually paid a dividend and a capital return. But that, I'm going to call that my most successful stock. And what happened with Ramelius was they put out a resource, a cut resource. It was about around 80,000 ounces, and they had some issues. They bought Mount Magnet for $38 million. And then at one point, the share price retreated to 4.7 cents. We jumped on board again, and the share price pretty much 50 bagged again. Now, Ramelius are probably the greatest predator in the gold sector. They've had some really good production reports as well. So that will go down as my greatest winner thus far. Northern Star, Bill Beamer used to stand up at conferences and say I was the first broker to write it up. I wrote that research report for clients. Share price was 6.3 cents at the time. They'd picked up Paulson's. I was actually in Dublin following Pearl Jam, and I got a phone call saying that Intrepid, for the sale of Paulson's, increased the price from 27 million up to 40, and the share price got down to 4.6, 4.7 from memory, and then it went well over $15. My most successful client in that stock turned 7 grand into 1.2 million. He was selling up to about $13.54. And I can honestly say that it doesn't change you. He's still lazy. I was selling a TV on Gumtree for $350. He came over and he talked me down $50. I then gave him a smaller TV with a stand, and he rang up the next day and said, have you got the screws for it? Once every 6 months, he'll buy me a coffee, but it certainly hasn't changed him. He ended up winning lotto again. We bought a lot of Atlantic Gold on the ASX. It did jack shit. It listed in Canada, and then St. Barbara took them over, and he got free shares in another company called Artemis. So my most successful client on a percentage basis has made all his money through either not selling, being too lazy to sell, or not knowing how to sell shares in Canada. But yeah, Northern Star, I didn't buy as much of that as Ramelius, but still, it was just goes to show you that the good people attract good projects. And at one point, Bill Beamer the share price was about a cent. So I'm looking at some winners. I created, when I got to 20 years in the industry, I went through and wrote down some winners. I actually helped raise $4 million for Independence Group. This was about 22 years ago. I floated that. I was a seed investor. In those days, companies were issuing shares at 1/10 of a cent. Then I had to pay another 10. My shares came out of escrow. I think they were $1.17. Then we ran into the biggest nickel bubble of all time, pretty much, and the whole package peaked at about $20. We were the second company to issue 1 cent loyalty options as well. So Sylvania Resources was the first. Arafura was another one, another winner. I went to the project near Alice Springs and walked over it. This was way back in 2003, and it's taken about 21 years to get where they are now. I believe Gina Reinhardt's involved. They spun out the uranium New Power, which ended up going to $1.66. So that was good. Noxa Farm was a bit of a fluke. That went 13 cents to 185. I don't know how I put that target on it when it was 15 cents. There were some others on the right. Gascoigne did very well. Then they pretty much went under. More on that to follow. Monax was another one. Went to $1.57, heaps of overseas buying. And Dominion Mining, I was meeting with another gold executive, and that was identified at 28 cents with a plant and the belief that they had about $160 million in tax losses, and the stock was capped at about 30 million. That market depth actually looked shit all the way to $6.79. They just looked as though the whole time they were going broke. Red metal more to follow. There's the Ramilius story. I ended up floating Medusa. This was a gold stock in the Philippines. Another one we did the loyalty options, so that did okay. And in the cannabis bubble, I took a role in the RTO of Botanics, which peaked at about 29 cents. And I believe it's going really well at the moment due to a product that stops you sweating. And Sandfire was a quality stock that I helped float. That initially went to $1, then went all the way back to 5.7. And the female geologist, she was drilling for potty gold, and her belief was that there was something deeper. And they ended up drilling into DeGrussa, and at the time, I think they ended up peaking over $10. So that was another one. So now I'm going to look at a few of our best performing stocks over the financial year. Spartan was one. I ended up going to the RRS conference, which is Nicholas Reed's on the Gold Coast, and I picked that up at about 11 cents. This was previously Gascoigne, which had been recapitalized, and they've made a hell gold discovery called Never Never, which is going to go straight through 1 million ounces by the look of it. They've also got another project called Pepper. They had a 5-year-old plant on care and maintenance. I worked out they had a lot of tax losses, which dwarfed their market cap at the time. And Ramilius went in and now hold about 17%, 18% of the company, and they've paid very high prices for it. So that to me looked like Dominion, and so we went hard at it. Dimerics was in phase 3 for a kidney drug, got down to about 6 cents, peaked over 60. They did an 8-cent rights issue, and the beauty of this rights issue came with no, it wasn't a one, they were free options. So you had a short dated option and a long dated option. So that's been better than a 10 bagger. I've backed that company for a long time. Nina Webster's great. Congrats to them. We're still heading towards probably a binary outcome later this year. She's done some licensing deals, but the real cheesecake will come if she can do a US deal. So far, so good, but there's still some risk. Farmost, a stock I've backed for many years. I ended up doing the rights issue shortfall at 2.5 cents. In 2019, I've done some placements since. The stock peaked at about 52.5 cents, and there were some free options which got to 35. So a 25 to 30 bagger for some. Handful of clients actually won lotto on this in the last couple of months. Again, hasn't changed them. But they've got a drug called Monipantal, which they're looking at lymphoma cancer in dogs. That trial has slowed down, and now they're looking at MND and using Monipantal, and it's been performing quite well. Now, of course, there's always stocks which I refer to as the red-headed stepchildren. You're never going to have winners all the time. I've been through some pretty bad years doing what I do, and I think the last 2.5 to 3 years have been the most challenging of my career. And I just want to say at the end of this, maybe 2024, 2025, I just like to reminisce it as being a good year, but that bear certainly doesn't look too happy. That was AI generated. Same with the freckled red-headed stepchild as well. So this one breaks my heart. Exafarm, I was contacted by the company and managed to raise some seed capital at a very cheap price. We managed to get the company listed. It actually opened up at 42 cents on day one. I think it closed at 42, went all the way back to 14 cents, and then proceeded to run away to $1. And at the time, I certainly had a 7-figure win. I told people I was going to sell some shares at $1, so I put some shares on the offer at $1. They went, but unfortunately, Exafarm, they employed a lot of people. They weren't able to secure a commercial deal in time. Funds dried up and they pretty much ran out of money. So some clients managed to sell on the way to $1. The rise was accelerated by exosomes delivering pretty much COVID treatments. So it was absolutely on a tear. And the company got suspended. Shareholders that stayed in it took a bit of a haircut. The share price went off the boards at 1.1 cents. So Exafarm has come back as Tryptamine Therapeutics. The code is TYP. They're trading at about 1.9 to 2 cents. And they're one of the few pure psychedelic companies on the market. Jason Carroll running it is extremely impressive. His presentations are great. The trials have been going well. And I think psychedelics is going to become, it might even become a bit of a boom sector. I don't think it's going to go as nuts as cannabis, but I certainly see some upside. We're in around 2 cents. Well, we paid 2 cents. There was no cheap shares or freebies issued. So you can buy that for probably 1.92 cents. I think liquidity will be good. Unfortunately, those that didn't sell Exafarm, I left quite a bit of mine. Our average price is a lot higher than 2 cents. So once it starts to run, you might get some blue sky on that one. Narada, initially quite successful. They were developing a drug to reduce cholesterol. Then there was one adverse effect in the trial on an animal. I don't know exactly what happened. Then they came out and said that cholesterol drug was essentially dead, and the share price collapsed. It actually got down to about 1.9 cents. And at one point, Narada was trading below cash backing, which was fortunate for some clients who went in and bought, because not long thereafter, they put out some good news on their traumatic brain injury drug. Computerized trading came in and it peaked at about 17 cents. So a big win for clients who averaged down, new clients. It's currently trading around 5. I've been buying some shares. I actually gave some to my son a few days ago for his 21st. Hope it works out for him. Now, looking at biotechs, it's been absolutely horrendous 2.5 years. I don't think anyone in the biotech industry has seen what's transpired. Some of these stocks are well above 90% off their highs, and pretty much the sector, apart from a handful of stocks, has just been annihilated. The selling has been absolutely relentless, and I'm going to give you one example. Radio Farm Theranostics. This has certainly been a red-headed stepchild who's been in prison for a while. This has just been a disaster. Floated at 60 cents and has just been on a death spiral. Hard to raise money at a decent price. The capital raisings weren't fully supported. Company took out a Lind facility. They pretty much were belting out the stock straight away, and buyers were reluctant to step in. But what's happened now is that Lantheus has come in to the company. They're a multi-billion-dollar NASDAQ company, and they're in the process of completing a $70 million placement. The stock was capped at about 12 million. So this is essentially a recapitalization of Radio Farm. It was a 4-cent placement with a 1-for-2 6-cent option with 2 years to run. And I think it's a very attractive deal because companies that Lantheus have invested in have done exceptionally well. And Radio Farm now isn't trading come raise. And by come raise, I mean the market perceives that they need to raise money, so investors won't buy it because they assume that a capital raise is coming. And what hurts with Radio Farm is that the fundamentals have always been solid, yet the share price at the time, 60 cents, it was certainly a hotter market, and it's now trading, pardon me, sub 4. So that's certainly been one of the worst performers. A lot of it out of their control, but some point when you go to raise money, they did raise, 14, the last one. There was another raise at 7.5, I think, and this one at 4. But at least a bigger company has realized the fundamental value of their programs. There's a lot behind it. And for those that average down around here, I think this stock could do exceptionally well, knowing that they're not going to raise money next week. So that's one of the worst ones, unfortunately. Now, one of our better biotechs has been proteomics. We've been involved in this at 17 cents. I underwrote a 20-cent rights issue. It's peaked around that $1.40 mark. Now, if you look at the right-hand side of that chart, this thing's been incredibly volatile. They've had delays with the rollout of their ProMarker D, which is it's a test kit for diabetic kidney disease that picks it up years before it happens. Sonic Healthcare in the US are going to help roll that out. They've got an alliance there. This just has been delays, and every time they announce a delay, they get poleaxed. Recently, there's been a bit of newsletter support, but this one's been a good stock for clients because it has been a gentle rise up until a bit of a spike, and there has been just that volatility of late. So this has certainly been one of our better performers. It hasn't provided any major dopamine runs, but yeah, great stock. Hopefully Sonic in the US get their shit together. We see the diabetic kidney test roll out. Gold stocks, the Australian dollar and US gold price has performed exceptionally well, yet apart from the majors, the gold stocks haven't been able to take a trip. I'm involved in what I believe to be some of the highest quality gold stocks on the market. One of those that struggled has been Oryaman. They're trading at about 3.5 cents. It was a 20-cent IPO. They got up over 30 at one point, but they do have getting towards 1 million ounces of gold, They've got Brad Valukas behind them, who worked for Northern Star, helped get their Pogo deposit up and running, their mine up and running in Alaska. And I think that stock, it's had a tough time since it's listed, went after some lithium, didn't come up with the big hits. But looking at the gold sector, I think there's certainly a lot of value in the gold juniors, and they just haven't responded essentially to the $8 gold price. So yeah, gold sector has been incredibly tough. The juniors have struggled to raise money as well. So not dissimilar to what we saw in the biotechs. So a lot of gold stocks ripped in half and then some. Now, I'm just going to cover a stock that really stuffed a lot of us up. Eagle Mountain Mining. It's a copper stock. And what happened was I did a capital raising for them at 13 cents. And unfortunately, it ran to about just over $1.30, and we were buying the stock on market as well. But what happened with this stock, even though it 10-bagged in no time, some clients didn't have their 12-month capital gains discount and unfortunately didn't sell. And one of the other points I want you to take away tonight is that it's near impossible to sell on the way down. Same thing happened with Exafarm. There was $1, it probably dropped to 80. Then people were thinking, oh, I'm not going to sell it till it gets back to $1. But unless you sell into the height of the dopamine, it's really hard to get out. And even after the 12 months had passed, it was still hard to sell. So I'm not a tax advisor. I can't give tax advice, but from my experience, it can even itself out of over time. Sometimes you're not going to get that discount. Sometimes you'll hold it. What we've just come out of has been a pretty nasty tax loss selling period. So Eagle Mountain, again, I'm going to put this in the win column. Copper stocks have been slaughtered, but now it's bounced off the lows. And in the last announcement, they've identified some porphyry systems at Silver Mountain, and in the announcement, it was kind of hidden. They've put in that they've had unsolicited approaches on Oracle Ridge. Charlie Bass, who's the chairman, has put around $16 million into this at much higher prices. Charlie was behind the first gold stock I bought, which was Eagle Mining, and then Aquila. So he's got a pretty good name in the mining industry. But this stock, even though the copper price has done well, has been on the slippery dip. Now, I had a very long-term relationship with a company called Minotaur. That stock never let me down. My highest conviction junior resource company on the market is Red Metal. Code is RDM. You'll look at that chart. Red Metal has been listed since 2003. Around 21 years, and we're just under 300 million shares on issue. I know that once some options get exercised, it's going to go over 300 million shares, but that's a lesson for a lot of companies in how to keep a tight structure. Now, as you can see from the chart, this stock, like most junior resource companies, is cyclical. It's had some massive runs. It will go to sleep at times. That big spike in mid-2012 was the discovery of Maronan. The next couple of drill holes failed to hit. The stock collapsed. 2015, 2016 was shocking. for junior resource companies, and they danced sideways at about 3 cents a share. They then put out a mining study on Maronan, stock recovered, and it's closed today at 17.5 cents. I'm going to disclose that we've bought about 13% of the company, my clients. I did raise them money at 8.5 cents with a 1-for-2 unlisted 13-cent option, which expires, I believe, in October next year. They own 44% of Maronan. They have a joint venture alliance with BHP. Now, the exciting times will come once they get in and drill Yarrie. Yarrie surrounds Rio's Winu discovery in the Patterson. They've worked diligently on getting that towards drill ready status. They also have a project called Pardue, which could be anything. That's certainly a high risk, high reward project. But more recently, Rob Rutherford has announced the Cybella rare earths discovery, which is 20 kilometers from Mount Isa. Instead of just putting out fluff announcements, they've actually created a product. They're working on getting the impurities down, but this project, they've actually gone out and done some step out drilling. This could be massive, but with rare earths, it's all about the metallurgy, but it's hosted in granite, and this is potentially a world first, 20 kilometers from Mount Isa, which is reeling from copper shutdowns. So with Red Metal, not only do they own 44% of Maronan, they've got Cybella, which I believe is going to take on a mind of its own. And I don't think the market understood the ramifications of their last announcement. It was very technical. But yeah, this is on what I know, what I can read in fundamentals. This is my highest conviction junior resource stock. So hopefully that relationship is going to keep on going, and it will dwarf my 2 marriages. Maronan Metals. Now, I was involved in the IPO. It was a 20-cent float. I've just completed a capital raising for the company. I worked with Veritas, and we raised money at 24 cents. Shareholders had the chance to tip in at 24. They were going to raise just 1.5 million. $3.3 million came in, and they accepted all of it, which I thought was a smart move. Now, what really stands out for Maronan is the silver potential at the Maronan project. All the great silver mines of the world are pretty much lead deposits. But what has happened is the lead silver is much closer to the surface than Maronan expected. And what they've developed now is 230 million ton resources pretty much next to each other. The ore is soft. Initial metallurgy looks fantastic, and it's in the Cloncurry region. So now they've got some money. They need to drill out a decent indicated resource, and then we're going to work on some mining studies. But to me, this looks like one of the best silver stocks on the ASX, if you could call it that. It did have quite a strong run when silver stocks were hot. Did get into the low to mid 30s. And obviously when you do a large capital raise, the share price tends to go back to that level where we are now. But to me, this looks like a great medium-term opportunity. It reminds me a little bit of the old Herald Resources and MPI Mines, but hopefully they can keep a tight structure. I see the biggest risk now is getting taken out far too early, because to have a resource of this quality near Cloncurry, with a relatively low market cap is rare. And I just think this is a fantastic stock. I'm actually on the top 20 in this one. There were no cheap shares. I've put my own money into this company. My son also got some shares in this for his 21st. So hopefully it's going to all come off for him. But to me, you can buy this below or at the same price that we've raised money. And I think this, you can sleep at night with this stock. There's no need to get nervous about it. It will, I think, go berserk if the silver squeeze actually happens. So that's the second high conviction stock. Saturn Metals. This is one of the best emerging gold stocks on the market. You can see in July 2020, the stock got over 80 cents. And that was during the upgrade of Apollo Hill. They have the Apollo Hill gold deposit. It's in WA. It's 1.844 million ounces. It is low grade, very low grade, in fact. But it's potentially going to turn into a heap leach operation where between 60 to 70% of the gold on the planet is produced via heap leach. It's not your conventional milling. It's where the gold is extracted via acid. And the initial economic study turned out very favorably. Now, I must disclose that I was involved in a 16.5 cent placement, which settled actually last week, tranche one of that. And if you have a look at the major shareholder notices, Line Selection, which is run by Hedley Widdop, have increased their stake to about 19% of the company. And this has a similar style of register to the likes of Red Metal and Maronan. And one of the other key factors is that they've just been granted environmental approval to drill on a salt lake. So the exploration potential certainly exists. And this is probably a bit of a forward-looking statement. This is giving me early Capricorn mining vibes. And go ahead and look at a chart of them. Their code is Charlie Mike Mike. And that stock has pretty much been your textbook gold stock. So to me, they're trading at 18 cents. It is very thinly traded. Tranche 2, I believe, will be issued in late August. So there might be another opportunity to buy. But I think this is certainly one of the premier emerging gold stocks on the market. And it just reminds me of other stocks like Saracen, Regis, Ramilius, the old Equigold way back, if some of you remember that, Eagle Mining. It's hard to predict that we're going to see another Northern Star, because what Bill did was acquire one gold project and it just became a sausage factory. So it's often what you don't know with these gold stocks that actually turns them into such winners. So yeah, keep an eye on that one. I think this is a great story. So my three highest conviction stocks are on known fundamentals. I'm not talking about backdooring in some shitty projects on the moon. Red Metal, Maronan, and Saturn. Now, to keep things interesting, we do like to have a bit of a punt. And oil is a tough sector, very hard. If you look at the trading activity in Melbana, Cody's Mike Alpha Yankee, it's been very volatile, and they've had some drilling issues, and the share price has pretty much collapsed. We're not involved in Melbana. Triangle Energy are in the Perth Basin, which is saying takeovers by Gina and MinRes to the tune of about $400 million. They've got 3 shots at an oil and gas discovery coming up. COS, which means the chances of success compared to other oil gas projects are quite high. Pilot Energy are buying their Cliffhead project off them for carbon storage. There was a large environmental fee hangover on that, and they're heading, now they've got ministerial approval, some of the pressure comes off Triangle Energy. But with oil wells, it's very tricky, almost as difficult as investing in diamonds. Now, a strategy some of my clients might employ will be to sell some shares when you see the well spud. Spud just means it's not a potato. It just means that the oil well drilling has commenced. And often these things can have a bit of a run, and it might be in the interest of some clients to de-risk. The risk reward on this is pretty good. Probably 50% downside, 500 to 1,000% upside if they hit the big ones. So they're the type of odds we really like. I'm very impressed with Conrad Todd, who's come out of retirement to run this company. They've cleaned it up. He's looking at further acquisitions in the UK and building a Southeast Asian oil story. So there's a lot of potential with Triangle Energy. And I think it's a bit of an omen stock, because when I parked to meet with the company, my car ended up getting towed. That's the first time that's happened. Anyway, one to watch. So what we do is we have our core high quality stocks, which can be boring, but they're underpinned by resources. And we also look for some swings that hopefully hit it out of the park. So one to watch, guys and girls. That's what the bottom of the market looks like to me. I'm not going to put up my Magic Mike slide because you know what I mean. And for many in the speculative sector of the market, that's what the top of the market looks like as well. There are so many opportunities to buy at the moment. We're struggling to know where to put the money. What we're hoping for is some of our stocks to run where we get a little bit of stock rotation. So that's one of my favorite slides I often use. And one of the things that remains constant from my experience since I started in 98 is there's always going to be a bandwagon, and suddenly you get an influx of dumb money. And what I've noticed is that this dumb money just seems to run for a long time, and a lot of stocks are just going to massively overshoot to the upside. And pretty much more recently, I guess we saw it with lithium stocks that were getting into the billion-dollar market caps. And the belief was that it was going to go on forever. Electric vehicles are really going to captivate the market. Well, now Tesla can hardly give them away. The secondhand market for Teslas in particular has collapsed. People can't sell them. There has been a move towards hybrids, but EVs are certainly, and hybrids are going to take their time to emerge. The lithium price collapsed. The dopamine rush in lithium stocks has pretty much subsided. And that same thing happened in .com. Same thing happened in uranium, childcare, eggs, cows, potassium, phosphate, all the other bubbles. We had bubbles with buy now, pay later as well. NFTs, shit coins. Obviously, crypto, the main crypto has done well, but outside of that, there's probably 23,000 scams going on there. So again, we might go fadless for a while, but rest assured that there's going to be another speculative bubble. It's going to be crazy. And I think since we've had such a depressed market the last few years, the biggest risk will be selling too early and then chasing at the top. So now I'm just going to run through quickly some areas where I do some press and presentations. I'm on Martin North's channel, Walk the World. My next show is actually next Tuesday. That's from 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Time. It'll go for just over an hour. So on that show, I am going to talk about the broader economy. I like to follow the economy. I'll look at housing, inflation, cost of living pressures, where I think now Australians and a lot of other countries, we're being sandpapered to death. So I try and keep that light. It is live, probably get a few hundred people on the call. It is recorded. And more recently, well, actually for a year, I was terribly out of shape. And I did some research. I went on the carnivore diet. I'm now 6 days a week in the gym. I haven't had a drink for 19 months. And I don't miss any of it. I don't miss sugar. I don't miss shit food. I don't bow to peer group pressure. But what it's allowed me to do is get fit. And I think when you're speculating, you need to get a good night's sleep. Because if you wake up in the morning and you feel like shit, you can't feel good about your investments. You can't feel good about anything. And the other advantage is that I wake up fresh every morning and I'm not going to have a hangover, whereas people you're competing against will probably have big nights and they're in bed with a hangy while stocks are running. So one of the biggest tips I can give is to stay mentally and physically fit as much as you can, because you really have to be on top of speculation. Even if you don't agree with carnivore, people say I'm going to die of a heart attack, or I'll get scurvy, or how do you go to the toilet? During that presentation, I worked out that I believe that the health obesity epidemic has been caused by seed oils. So suss that out. It's a little bit long, but I'll go through my journey on what I'm doing. The next show's on finance, so check that out if you like. Now, I talk at conferences. My next conference I'm talking at is the Australian Gold Conference. That's at Crown Barangaroo. That's a fantastic conference. Vince Sorrenti is doing the humour and the MC. I'm making a trip out of this one. I'm also a keynote speaker at Nicholas Reed's conference on the Gold Coast. And in my opinion, this is the best retail investor conference in Australia, bar none. David Koch is actually, I believe he'll probably close the conference. I was originally going to close it, but they managed to nab Kochie. And this is a conference, it's held at Royal Pines, which is a fantastic vibe, where the investors actually listen, they'll go talk to the managing directors, and they'll actually buy the bloody stock. And it's not the industry talking to the industry. I've known these people for many years. We're all getting older, but I now that know their children are going. It's a great lineup of companies, and if you can get there, by all means, I highly recommend it. Making Money Matter. I do regular interviews with Kerry Stevenson. She used to be on Small Caps. She's currently at Rick Rule's conference in Florida. Rick Rule's probably regarded as the greatest resource speculator in current times. I've had a little bit to do with Rick. Sprott came into Ramilius with me. They've been in some other speculative stocks. I actually interviewed him in 2011. Rick Rule, I know it was Eric Sprott, was actually at when Kerry ran the gold conferences at Luna Park. I actually got to meet Eric Sprott. They created the Sprott Uranium Fund, which caused a lot of the recent run in the uranium price and hype. And I believe Sprott have just set up a copper fund as well. So certainly one to watch. Thebull.com.au, once a month, Blackie will ring me up and ask for me to write 2 buys, 2 holds, 2 sells. I actually struggle with that a bit. I'm not allowed to have much emotion in it. It's always hard to come up with stocks to sell, stocks to hold, etc. And you're going to see more of me on Stockhead. So that ends the official presentation. As I said, I do have some space for if you want to work with me. What I do for clients is pretty much over service. I do send out emails with announcements attached. Where possible, I'll talk to the company. I'll provide a summary. I keep you up to date. I'll run Zoom reviews throughout the year, and I get access to placements. So again, I know with the influx of discount brokers, many prefer to do it themselves. I mean, that's fine because they're on the other end. They're on the other side often. Everyone provides liquidity, which is great, but Tony at altocapital.com if you want to reach out and hopefully share in some good years ahead, because from my coming up to 26 years, I've had some very, very good winners that have changed people's lives financially. It hasn't changed their lives as a person. Once a tight ass, always a tight ass. A lot of people are quite generous. We'll have a bit of we have catch-ups. We'll be catching up at these conferences. I run drinks in Melbourne for clients. I'll be on the mineral water. No getting drunk for me. I've decided I'm not going back to alcohol probably indefinitely. So yeah, we have a lot of fun. I try and keep things entertaining. Obviously, the last 2.5 years have been utter shit. It's been really hard work, and I know some clients have jagged a few discoveries. They've jagged Farmos, they've jagged Spartan. I had one lucky client that bought Galileo 2 weeks before they went from 22 cents to $1.90. Sometimes it's a lucky phone call. Sometimes a client was in the bush, didn't have much internet access. He sold at the top in Ramilius. Other clients that got in touch with me earlier didn't get the top. So it's all about a bit of luck, but you've got to have the balls to come into this sector. You don't go defensive in speculative situations. It's not for everyone. I've worked out the right character traits that see people succeed. I'll just stop sharing that. So yeah, if I could get you to all switch off your cameras. Yeah, I've got some time for some questions, guys. So if you could switch off your cameras. If there's any questions, I thought I saw Max, you had a question? Max, I thought you raised your hand. Another one. Andrew, you got your camera on. Any questions? Feel free to fire away. Nothing's off limits. Oh, wow. Yep, thanks. Did you want to ask a question? Yeah, all right. Fire away. I don't know if you're getting, I'm sending through the message so you can unmute.
How about that? Have you got me?
Oh, I got you now.
Yeah. All right, Tony.
Hey, good to catch up with you.
Yeah. You're looking dramatically.
Obviously, I haven't. I don't drink anymore, so I'm boring apparently.
No, all good, all good. Just on the overall markets at the moment, with everything going sky high
Yeah.
towards your back, like, do you actually place any emphasis on that in like evaluating these companies, or you just don't care kind of what the overall markets are doing?
Oh, look, I care, but what really has caused the indices to really fire up is the S&P 500, which is 501. I think it's about 505 stocks, has been driven by 7 companies, and Nvidia has just gone parabolic.
Yeah,
And the Nasdaq as well. So there are ETFs such as SNAS, BBUS, BBOZ that have all performed poorly because a handful of stocks have really taken over the market. And if you take away the Magnificent Seven out of the S&P 500, the market performance pretty much has been flat. And the rush into AI stocks, I think, yeah, it's going to have a future, certainly, but I think it's getting towards irrational exuberance, to steal a term from Robert Schiller. I'm actually thinking about getting back into some of these ETFs just to park some money as well.
yeah,
So
interesting.
look, I think that with the major indices, the Dow, the S&P, the Nasdaq, I think that complacency has set in, and it's only going to take a couple of 500 down nights. Maybe we cop 1,000. We've got the election coming up as well. That will see an impact on small companies. But what I've managed to do is we seem to muddle our way through major corrections. Obviously, the Nasdaq was nasty. This is way back. And what has really exacerbated the last shitty 3 years has been the fact that indices have gone against the trend, and small cap stocks, regardless of the underlying commodity prices and fundamentals, have essentially crashed in slow motion. So, yeah, complacency is rife. And, you look at what's happened to Tesla, that went parabolic. A lot of shorts got wiped out. Nvidia, it has to end. It has to end.
Yeah.
And I think we're closer to the top than a resumption. And I think markets are going to get tired. We did quite well out of BBUS for a time there. They actually paid about $1.12 return per unit, which was unheard of.
Yeah.
And I think now's the time to start looking at these. They do carry a lot of risk, but I also think that where the S&P 500 is, even where the ASX 200, I think, the banking sector has certainly outperformed. It's probably the period of these massive bank profits. I think it's going to come to an end. I feel like the odds are we're probably going to head into a recession. You look at mortgage rates. You could get a 2-year for 1.99, for Christ's sake. I bought in Perth. I thought Perth was cheap. I managed to fix my loan 5 years for 2.64. And I think now you struggle to see a variable under 6. And if you look at the East Coast, a lot of that is clearly money laundering. And even the Governor General came out and said that. I go to a lot of home opens around my area. I live in the Jundana area, and there's upward pressure. There's just no supply. So I think Perth has probably got a way to go. But, you look at the economy. If you go down to Leederville, it's dead now. There's shops vacant everywhere. And
restaurants are closed.
Yeah. And you look at Scarborough now. Scarborough's coming off. So I think, looking at the economy, I think we're going to be in a world of pain. And you're going to look at antisocial behaviour, you're going to look at domestic violence. And I'm going to cover this on the live show on Tuesday. So, yeah, tune in if you can.
And just one other thing, if I can.
Yeah, sure.
Just on the as well, this is just an overall market question, but with the impact of China, I'm paying close attention on China. Like I've been working in the mining industry for 15 years,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it compared to like in the mining industry where there's just every man and a dog seems to get a job.
Yeah.
I think the peak is in. I think there's going to be massive layoffs coming as soon as iron ore hits 90, maybe even less. Who knows? But the overall picture I'm asking about is in China. What do you think the future is there? How does that impact on Australia? I mean, the slowdown is, I think, by all accounts, happening.
Well, their property market was a fugazi, right?
Yeah.
Ghost towns, propping up, cheap loans, manipulation, bullshit, right?
Yeah.
BHP today has shut down a nickel mine.
Yeah.
That was just announced today, and that's going to affect 1,000 jobs.
Yeah.
Now, how many of those workers now got to start selling their toys and probably selling their house? I think the iron ore price, Fortescue's held up for way too long.
Yeah.
I don't know how the iron ore price was holding above $100. I just don't get it, because the Chinese property market is cooked. You can put a fork in it.
Yeah.
Their economy, God knows how much they fudged the figures. So yes, that's going to have a huge impact on WA and the economy. Lithium sector's turned to shit. Nickel sector has suffered due to the mass supply coming out of Indonesia.
Yeah.
And really, it's the gold miners that are now starting to report record quarters. They're cashed up. So I think the corporate activity will come in gold, but where the job's going to come from? Are Ausgold going to build Katanning? Are we going to see expansions of the mines? So I think, especially here in Perth, I think it's all turning to shit and spending slowing down, and the markets have gone against fundamentals for too long. We're all complacent. Yeah,
Agreed.
it's going to hit the fan.
Yeah. Totally agree. Yeah.
So I mean, I don't go out and get pissed anymore. So, but I do pay attention to the nightlife, and if you look at what's happening interstate, and you look at what's happening in the US with property prices, and I know this is going to be a weird thing to say, but New Zealand is going to lead us on this occasion. House prices in some places there are down over 20%,
Yeah.
and their economy is shit, but it's leading us. So if we think we're different to Kiwis, I think we've got another thing coming.
Yeah.
You've got the Chinese threat as well. So yeah, once iron ore falls off a cliff, then yeah, a lot of jobs are going to be lost, and there's not enough second jobs out there. It's going to be mayhem, but I still see short-term to medium-term upside in Perth, because it's still relatively cheap to the rest of the country. But you look at the vacancy rate for rentals, it's an absolute crisis. I don't know how families can survive with all the bills. Admittedly, we're going to get some energy relief shortly on our bills, but that's going to fuel bloody inflation. Michelle Bullock is someone you'd rather as your school teacher, not someone dictating your economic future. So, oh yeah, I think we're in for an absolute bath on the economy, and we need a reset, because all the PE ratios are out of kilter. The price to income ratios on property Sydney's at 13.8. Long term, it's 4 to 5. Maybe it corrects to 8 to 9, but that's going to cause a world of hurt. That's going to affect a lot of industrial companies, a lot of property companies, and eventually it will have an impact on the index. So yeah, it's just a case of, you call it Pantene, Ian. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen.
Cheers. Thanks.
That's all right. Hopefully that answered your question. Jeffrey.
Oh, thanks, Tony. Been a while since we had a chat. I just had an idea. I don't know whether you've done much reading on this, but I noticed that there's been a bit of a breakthrough in sodium ion batteries for electric cars. And and that's been done by the Korean Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, and also the Osaka Metropolitan University. So this is quite interesting because we might get, there's only a few chemical companies in the world that have got sustainable and low cost production of sodium or salt. So this could be very interesting for the lithium price going forward. I sold all my lithium shares a while ago, but
Yeah.
but this could further undermine that going forward. But it's very interesting anyway.
Oh, there's lots of threats to lithium. I mean, the lithium sector's had a few cracks. It crashed quite badly. I think it was January 2018. Then it went through that lull, and it had a massive rise. The lithium price just got well ahead of itself. But I think there's always the risk of new technology, different types of batteries. Yeah, I've heard of that. There's a belief now that hydrogen's going to take over. But that's probably a decade away. I know there's a company, the code is PH2. They're involved with hydrogen buses and vehicles. And I know that that with this revolution, yes, certainly going to be new technology. And if you can identify some juniors in that sector, it mightn't take off straight away, but be good to get in early. But yeah, when you're not in a bubble, it's hard to call it. I mean, who would have called NFTs and lots of other rubbish, all these meme coins, GameStop? You know, there's even a coin now named after Hook Tour. Hook Tour, I don't know, many of you would know her, but if you don't, look it up and you'll be surprised that just, you know, I have a saying that fear is temporary, greed is perpetual, and human stupidity is infinite. And I think that's going to carry on. And I saw an example of this. I take my dog for a walk at the park, and one bin, I reckon, had 100 dog poo bags full to the brim, and the bin 3 meters away was pretty much empty. And I'm thinking, well, we're all trend followers. You know, even when you drive, you'll see that there'll be 30 cars lined up in one lane, the other lane's empty. I always go to the other lane. So I think dumb money, once it comes in and it's all FOMO driven, these sectors will just get out of control, like I saw in the dot-com bubble, because that was probably the most intense bubble I've ever seen. And what I've noticed, guys, girls, is that once you start to get your dopamine rush isn't as exciting, these stocks are going to struggle, and some of them have to keep going towards production, and their market caps were clearly unsustainable. And the vast majority believe that these things are forever. Well, no, I'm sorry. But yeah, no, it'd be interesting on that research, Jeffrey. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see that. Anyone else? My wife gets home in about 10 minutes and the dog's going to go nuts. So I'm happy to stay around for another 10. If anyone's got any questions. I hope the presentation wasn't too boring. I think through my 25 years as an advisor, I'd probably have the largest number of subjects on the psychology front. I've dealt with thousands of people over the years, and I think I know what makes a good client. I know those that are going to survive in this area, and it's the steady players. It's those that realize when they've had a bit of luck. It's those that can put away money for capital gains tax, because I know that gets a lot of people. As I said, I'm not a tax advisor. And they're prepared to buy a stock like Red Metal, prepared to buy Maronan, knowing that the underlying fundamentals are solid. There's a chance they're going to get taken over. They might have a bit of a run when, you know, if you go on X, There's the hashtag silver squeeze. They're talking about silver going to the moon based on being poor man's gold and its impact for solar. But I've seen these companies since I've been a broker, since before I was a broker, get into production. You know, you look at Northern Star, one gold mine, he buys, the gold mine apparently was tied, and then suddenly he's got 8. It's often what you don't know, but I will reiterate, you just got to have the right temperament. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. Look, it's nice to buy a stock. It's nice for me to have a new client buy a stock and it goes above what they paid for it. But more times than not, it'll fall below that. And suddenly they want to come over and punch me in the nose. You've just got to accept the fact that you're going to have losses along the way. I liken it to someone at the casino playing blackjack against an ace or a 10 who will sit on 16 the whole time. You can't do that. You've got to swing. It only takes 1 10 to 20 bagger to change everything. It's hard to sell on the way down. People are obsessed with even numbers. What I do with my clients, I'm not afraid to buy uneven numbers, and if having a weird number is going to allow you to take profits, to round down to an even number, well, at least part of my job's done. And I know clients would like to hang on to 1 million shares. You know, it's like buying a packet of chewing gum with a $100 note. They don't want to break it. And my greatest lesson as a broker financially was letting a 7-figure win disappear like a burp in the wind. We're all guilty of that at times. I've sold some other stocks near the top. I've done well, but it is a very hard game, and that's why you've got to stay on top of it mentally. You do have to pay attention to the economy and what's going on around you, but I can assure people that I don't think what we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years is rare, where small caps, regardless of fundamentals or the gold price, have massively underperformed when indices are rip-roaring away. So yeah, this has just been a rare occurrence, certainly over my 25 years. But, you know, these wins will come again. I don't know who the rock stars in the industry are going to become. There's always rock stars. But yeah, it's a bloody tough game, and certainly been draining, but I try and stay positive on it. That's for sure.